Good evening, and welcome to Black Mental Health is Black Health. I'm your host, Bronwyn Lucas, and I have some very special guests who will join us tonight, and they will introduce themselves shortly. If this is your first time here, we always start with some deep breathing. Why? After the end of a day, we might just need a moment to decompress. And the deep breathing is something you can do for your mental and physical health any time of day or night. So if you've never been with us before, here's how it works. To make sure you're breathing deeply, put your hands on your stomach, and when I say breathe in, you will breathe in through your nose very slowly. I will count to four and you breathe in slowly as I count. And when I say out, you breathe out slowly to four. This will allow you to get three deep breaths in. As you breathe in, you'll feel your stomach going out, extending because you're breathing so deeply in. So let's try it. Breathe in, two, three, four, out, two, three, four, in, two, three, four, out, two, three, four. One more in, two, three, four, out, Black mental health. Two, three, four. Well, tonight we are going to be joined by two guests, and we will discuss the school year of 2021-22. Now that COVID is over, what do we have before us? What's going on with our school system? Now, some people often say, well, yeah, some of your shows don't have to do with mental health. I beg to differ. What does education have to do with our mental health? Well, if our students are not educated well or are mistreated in the education system, are there any issues in the education system? That is going to impact your mental health, the way you're treated, the way you are, the way people view you if you don't have proper education. So, yes, our mental health is very important, and education is linked to it. So, yes, it is very much a part of it. And this year, anxiety and depression increased after COVID and going back to school, and we'll talk about this more. So, the mental health was definitely impacted by our by simply being in school after COVID. So, we are going to be joined by some of those in the education arena who are going to talk about that with us. So, we have with us Nykki Williams, Arashola, and Kanetra Cooper. They joined us in the beginning of the year. They joined us in January, and now we've seen a whole year, and they are going to get started. I like to let my guests introduce themselves. I always give them a question. So I want to know, ladies, why are in the world are you in the field of education? What brought you to it? And tell us something unique about you. Nykki, I'll let you go first.
Okay, I have been in the field of education for 26 years, and I fell into the field of education through serendipity. I had moved to Dallas and I needed a job, and I became a sub, and then I became a permanent sub, and then I decided to stay and went through the alternative certification program. And so now I am a school counselor for grades 11th through 12th grade. And that's something unique about me and why I'm in the field of education.
Awesome. Kanetra, tell us about you. Why in the world are you in the field of education? And tell us something unique about you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Katrina Claudine Cooper. My mom gave me all those names. So that's one unique thing about me. I have all those names. I've been in education going on 13 years. And one of the reasons that I am truly in education is because I really do love kids and I love to see them grow and I love to see them discover new things and I love seeing them be their best self. Um, I did come out of the classroom. I was promoted this year. And so I'm no longer in the classroom, but I am an social studies instructional specialist with the district. I am still impacting classrooms and still making connections. Um, One other unique thing about myself is that I had an opportunity to live in the UAE in Dubai, and I taught there for 3 years.
Thank you both for sharing. So we're going to jump right into it. We have a lot to say about education. Um, we'll probably exceed our 45 minutes and may have to ask him to come back and finish his conversation. I do want to just make some general comments about just education and how I see it. So, when I think about it, one of the things that COVID did was highlight some of the issues that already existed in education, some of the deficits, some of the things that I feel are wrong with the current model of education that is based, we're still using from the 1800s. We haven't really changed. And COVID highlighted that. Mental health of staff and students has been negatively impacted by COVID. We're seeing a rise of anxiety and depression and health concerns with educators and students that are anxiety related. So, tonight we're going to address some of those issues, just what is going on the with education. So, ladies, we have completed our first year since COVID. In the beginning of the year, they were concerned with lack of progress. Students were at home, many of them didn't learn, some didn't do anything, some did a lot. Virtual school was good for some, was horrible for others. Now that this year is over and you've had a chance to maybe weed out some of that, what can you say about student progress and growth? I'll start with you this time, Kanetra. What can you say about progress and how it's impacted by COVID?
So, in my opinion, um, our students, our education system is still in trouble. Um, it is now past the just the academic piece as it's always been, but I think the fact that students have not had an opportunity or have actually had a disconnect from the social aspect of things, that it has made an even more drastic impact on education, as well as teachers. So, in a nutshell, the entire education system is definitely under attack. Um, of course, even though the students are in the building now, maybe with or without a teacher of record, but the fact that they're in the building, they're struggling with the social emotional aspect, how to collaborate and how to get along with each other. And so a lot of classrooms were experiencing classroom management issues. So the academic piece was not going forth full throttle. And so, in my opinion, we are now in a worse off situation than we were before, because now, on top of the academic deficit, we now have to deal with students not being able to handle that deficit and being around their peers at the same time.
Nykki, I see you shaking your head. What do you have to say?
Miss Cooper, I would definitely agree with you. And of course, opinion about the situation. And I would liken it to atrophy. Um, it's a muscle that had not been used, and it's just very, very weak. And so when we talk about growth, we're going to talk, we need to talk about the social, emotional, and physical growth. And so when I look at it, the kids grew up physically, but their brain had atrophy, and they reverted back to behaviors of in kindergarten. It felt like they lost structure. They didn't know how to be kind to one another. They didn't know how to listen. They didn't know how to keep their hands to themselves. And so they just had a reversion back to their former years. And so, like any muscle that's been atrophied, you have to begin to stretch it and pull it. Well, when do we get the time to stretch and pull socially and emotionally? While trying to maintain the academic rigor that should be there. So I would definitely agree with you when you say that we are in trouble. We are definitely in trouble.
I totally agree with both of you guys. And yes, we are in trouble. We were in trouble before, as you said, and now it's even worse. You talked about the social emotional. We're going to look at deficits, and when people think about deficits, um, we think about the academic deficits, but the social deficits that students face are just as important, maybe even more so, because they impact the educational deficits. One of the things that I see is that students who were home that whole year, you say it's like they forgot how to interact because they didn't have to. Especially if you were an only child, and let's say you're in elementary school, you don't have anybody to go outside and play with. And if you're an only child, it's just you and your toys, and you don't have to share with anybody because it's you and your toys. And
Mm-hmm.
even if you had siblings at home, it's just you and your siblings, and you interact differently when you're at home with them. So the ability to practice social skills for a whole year was taken away. And so you have a year now, you come back, and you didn't have to sit at home. If you needed to get up and go to the bathroom, you just got up, went to the bathroom. Now you're in school, you got to raise your hand, or you got to wait till everybody goes, and you forget. You just, where you go? I'm going to the restroom. No, baby, sit down. So all of that, you had to start all over again. And even in high school, you forget all that. You just get up and go. So much of that end of social skills and just how to relate to people has really changed. So that I see that as a deficit that we don't really discuss. Um, what are some educational deficits, though? Or are there still deficits at the end of the year? We made it a whole year. Do the deficits still exist?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. And the one thing that, and I don't know if Nykki can attest to this, but the one thing that startles me is that I don't know that everybody else that are in positions such as TA and different entities that make decisions in regards to education is fully aware where we are, because they are still making decisions to make school even more rigorous for our students, which rigor is definitely needed in education. But for instance, the STAR test, they are now increasing the type of questioning that will happen on STAR. So students will not only see multiple choice questions, they will see all different types of questioning that's really going to challenge these students. And so I don't know that we've fully taken into consideration just where we are, if we've given ourselves adequate time to cover the deficit in the academic side, whether it's math, reading, those are the main focus, but they all overlap into the other core subjects, science, social studies, things of that nature. And so I really, sometimes I just really wonder, do they really understand where these kids are as they're making these decisions and making these changes?
I agree. Nikki, what do you see as some of the academic deficits in high school?
W-
Those who are
One of
graduating.
the deficits that I was going to talk about was reading. Children weren't required to read books, and in fact, at our high school, we do not have a library. And so, individuals who read, yes, no library. We don't have a librarian, and so individuals are reading from their tablets and they're reading from their phones, and so they're not, they don't have the ability, they don't have the stamina to read a STAR test. They don't have the stamina
Mm,
to be able to read and comprehend, because most of the things that they read are three line bits of
Mhm,
information, and
mhm,
somebody then goes in and talks about that information, or
mhm,
that they're reading these books online that are written by whoever decided to write a book that day, like through Good Novel. And so the grammar is incorrect, the punctuation is incorrect, so when they talk, they're talking incorrectly, they're talking in slang, they're trying to relate to each other in slang. And so when you're talking to an adult, we're just looking at you like, I don't understand what you're saying. I do not comprehend that. But then the other deficit that I have, and it's not just in school, but it is the world as a whole. And if we're just going to look at the United States, is that there's a deficit of respect. And so when we do not have respect for ourselves, when we do not have respect for our peers, we do not have respect for adults, we have no respect for our parents, we have no respect for those in authority, that causes a deficit in every area because you think you know everything and you don't know anything and you refuse to be taught by anyone. And so then your parents are rude and disrespectful. The government is rude and disrespectful. And so that creates this chain of events. And so now the teachers are being jumped on and pushed down, and then they come out being disrespectful, respectful, and ineffective. And some are just saying, I'm tired. I am tired. So now we have a deficit of teachers who are mentally available. And then we have, when she talked about teachers of record, what people don't know is that there were many classes that did not have a full-time teacher, especially at the high, I don't know about elementary, but at the high school level, the kids would go into the lecture hall and turn on their Google Classroom, and whoever put an assignment in there, who knows, whoever put an assignment in the Google Classroom, they worked on that Google Classroom. So then we have kids who were, I'm sorry, I'm taking so much time, but we had students who were honor students and who had always done well. They were getting 70s because whoever the teacher of record was, they were just giving people 70s straight across the board. They were not grading the work. They were not checking the work. And so students who have been honor students were not able to achieve. So we had a lot of chaos because we're talking about seniors who are getting ready. This is their senior year. They're going to college and they had never made a 70. And so colleges are looking at their grades from December and saying, where did that 70 come from? And so that was affecting scholarships. And so you had to decide what was their actual grade because who graded their work. That's all I'm saying. I'm sorry.
Oh no, I definitely agree. I definitely can talk. That's a whole nother show.
A whole nother show.
But I also think that in addition, there's a deficit in communication around the board as well and how to handle conflict. And so with all of these different things compiled together, and you have students who, as Nykki said, are mentally immature for where their bodies are and to be in the settings that they are. And I did move from an elementary campus to a middle school campus. So I was able to really get a full aspect of what middle school is like, as well as how they handle conflict, how they handle communication, and just their overall perspective on education. And so our students have lost, they already had very little faith in our educational system and our teachers and our staffs, even though I know teachers across the board, many of us work tirelessly to support these kids, but they just continue to see themselves be let down. And so then there's this confidence that's how do they articulate that? How do they communicate what they're feeling? And then how do they handle conflict? And so just walking in the building, you're bound to encounter conflict. And so that was another deficit that I also definitely would acknowledge this year. And I'm sure that'll come up later as far as some of the causes of that.
I wanted to mention you talked about lack of respect. Along with that is the bullying of teachers. And let me tell you why I call that a real issue. I feel like teachers are being bullied by the government,
yes,
and by parents here in
yes.
Texas. We're going to be specific to Texas. When now parents can vote on what a teacher is going to teach, when we are back to the days where we're banning books, when we're putting out a false narrative that critical race theory is being taught so that false history can be perpetrated, such as there really was no slavery, it was just indentured servitude or things like that, where that's actually being taught, which is a false
Involuntary
narrative.
relocation was the word
Yes.
today.
And so we have see all of these false narratives that are out there. And if you're not teaching that false narrative, you may be fired. So that's why I say the bullying of teachers, because yeah, it's a false narrative and you have to do it. When parents can vote on what you teach in your classroom, and so the profession is being not being respected. And you have across the state, and we're being specific to Texas right now, where they're bumping up the beginning salary and salary of those who've been around to put the idea is to put more money into education so it is, seen as a more viable profession. However, on the other end, you see all this happening to educators. And when we talk about violence, we'll get to that, some other things. But I'm just saying, looking at, as you say, that lack of respect, I think that's another layer to it as well. Any thoughts?
But the country as a whole, especially the United States, and with with the disrespect from the top all the way
Mhm.
down, um, within the last 4 years, 5 years now, um, people have just gotten disrespectful, and teachers are catching the brunt of it because their students are hearing it from their parents, they're hearing it from their
Mhm.
grandparents, they're hearing it on TV. And then we have these mediums such as TikTok and Facebook, and all of these mediums that perpetrate or perpetuate this disrespect. It's really not good.
No, it isn't. And to our audience, tonight is about not necessarily about being negative, but about putting out there what's really going on so you are aware, because so many people aren't. And hopefully you will share. I'll stop and say share now so this can go to your page. So look under the link and share. We need to improve our education system. We talk about our children, our future. Well, if we look at our education system right now, our future is scary. There is no other way to put it. So yeah, we need to put this out there. Um, I wanted to. We have so much to discuss. I want to move around a little bit and look at another area. Hold on just a second. That we want to talk about, and that is, um, we've talked about some of the deficits academically and socially. Without giving the names of your districts, are there anything that your district is doing to assist students in eliminating some of these deficits, both academic and social? Anything your districts are doing?
Our district is offering summer school, and they are offering courses uh, for credit recovery. We have several different camps that are being sponsored throughout our district so that the kids can become involved socially and emotionally during the summer. So those are a few things that we are offering. But as far as intense, we have school intervention classes, one period a day. They have intervention where they're to go in and to pick up skills, but that was new, and it really doesn't have a full scale curriculum, and it's not cohesive yet. Maybe in the upcoming year, um, we will all get on the same page and it'll be the same thing across the board. And so there's something called a school redesign. And so all of our administrators have gone to a conference this week to discuss school redesign. I don't know what that is. I don't know what that means, but everybody has gone. So, of course, when we come back in August in professional development, we will learn within 2 or 3 days what we will need to implement for the new school year of school redesign. But I really can't tell you what that is or what it's about.
And here's the interesting thing: you will have 2 or 3 days to learn how to redesign the whole school year. That is so adequate. Yes. Kanetra, in your district, what kind of things are they doing to address academic and social deficits that have developed?
Well, definitely some of the same things that Nykki shared. So we did offer summer school this year as well for students who were not successful in math and reading, as well as those students who needed credit recovery in order to move to the next grade level. I think one of the biggest impacts was House Bill 4545 that was passed. And so one of the big ordeals was during the school year, we had to figure out how to implement so many hours. I'm not sure, Nykki, if you know exactly how many hours, but I think from the junior high level, it was maybe 45 hours or some number. Again, I'm not 100% sure, but we had to account for students receiving X amount of hours if they were not successful on the STAR math or STAR reading. And so, in addition to the teacher having current curriculum and instruction going on for the current grade level, there was time that was then shaved off of the schedule to allow for this sort of an intervention period to get students these extra hours that the state mandated that every student have. And so it became really tricky around that aspect. So we did have about 27 minutes during the school day, Monday through Friday. One of those days was allocated towards social emotional. And so we'd have 2 days of reading, 2 days of math, and then that fifth day would be some type of social emotional lesson. Now, do note that this intervention time was not technically from a teacher of that particular grade level or from the teacher of record. So for the most part, students were divided up based on their performance. Students who did not, who were successful on STAR were able to go to some type of enrichment class during that time period. We had a certain number of students who received all of their instruction on the computer. And then we had a certain number of students who were in classes where there were lessons created for those teachers to actually implement and facilitate those lessons for those students to get those hours. And so there were a couple of Saturdays also that we had to implement to get some of those students the hours to make sure that they were in compliance. And then right around leading up to the last few weeks of STAR, we had our district set up where our central office went out into classrooms and supported teachers to help students prepare for STAR. And so, since my area of specialty is social studies, I visited my daughter's junior high school and I supported small groups to help those eighth graders study for their history STAR exam. And so, those are some of the things that we did as that touch on the social emotional as well as the academic piece. And then, of course, you just have your norm. Teachers individually would offer tutoring for their students so that they could come in and sometimes this was paid and sometimes it wasn't. I think it was supposed to be for the most part. But, as I said, we do have teachers working tirelessly to actually help these students be successful. But for the most part, the intervention time during the school day, we had a couple of Saturday classes. We even sent out, like I said, central office to go out and help those campuses who were struggling and who felt like their students were not prepared. And as far as the social emotional piece, we did have that responsibility was on the teacher of record as well as that intervention class at least one day a week for students. I know on my campus specifically, we actually had a person in place that was, and it's probably the same in high school, Nykki, but they were actually in place to help. It was kind of restorative practices liaison. And so they actually would come in and help teachers figure out how do you restore a relationship when a student walks out of your classroom or causes a disruption, or even when two students have a fight, that piece to help students understand what's the proper way to deal with that conflict. Because what happens, they suspend them, both the students go home, and half of them want to leave school anyway, but then they just come back and go back to the class and see the same person that they had the conflict with.
Mm-hmm.
And so we really worked hard to try to help students mend that relationship. What does that look like? And so I think those are some of the things that were put into place in our district to try and help. I won't say that it was a huge success or that it was a huge failure. I think anything at this point for our kiddos is work in progress.
Miss Cooper, I'm over here trying to hold back tears because your district made a concerted effort and we were just left holding the bag. And I want to know, what is the demographics of your district? What's the demographic?
Very diverse. So, I mean, of course, just depending on different areas, but we have a pretty heavy population of African American students. I mean, it's pretty diverse for the most part. And so that is something that we looked at. I mean, even like I say, a couple of years ago, like when the George Floyd thing came out and there was a big thing with race, one of my daughter's high school was the Martin Warriors. And they had an Indian head as their mascot. Well, they actually eliminated that completely and came up with a different logo with just the M to try and make sure that as a district, they were not projecting certain discriminations or certain stereotypes on any race or ethnic group. And so they have tried very, very tirelessly to try and combat those things. But really, to be honest, Nykki, it feels like we're outnumbered because there's so many kids. Like Martin High School had almost 4,000 kids. That's a lot of kids in one high school. And so it was tough, but they are trying.
Yes, your district has done well.
And when you think about the idea of restorative practice that you're seeing, in this district and others, it is very important to maintain that until we address some of the mental health issues that are as a whole in the district, we're going to still fail our kids. They're not going to be able to learn. As you said, the example of I have a fight with Joe on Monday, I get sent home, and maybe Joe gets to stay. And when I come back, I sit next to Joe in the classroom. And everything's supposed to be okay. No one's talked to me, helped me process it. Or if I'm Joe, you hit me in front of everybody and I want to get back with you. No one processed this. So the idea of restorative practice, for those who don't know, it does help with that. Before we leave this area, you guys have both used a term that I'm not sure everyone understands, and I want you to really break it down. I know what it means, but I want everybody to get it. And that term is teacher of record, because I want to talk a moment about what it means to have a teacher of record and how that really looks in terms of a competent. Kanetra, you work in the main office. Nykki, I'm coming to you. Don't worry about it now. What is your view of teacher of record?
So basically, the teacher of record is a teacher who is hired in to teach a specific grade level, to teach a specific subject or subjects, and they are given a roster at the beginning of the year. And so when you log into the system or when that student gets their report card, that teacher's name shows up on the report card because that teacher is responsible for their grading, for their growth, all of those good things for that particular class. When you have a sub in a classroom, that person was not specifically hired or assigned that particular class. And so they may or may not be there tomorrow or the next day or the next day or the next day. But the teacher of record is who is documented as the teacher that student should be attending class with on a day-to-day basis throughout the academic school year. And they are certified. Yes. They are certified to teach that particular group of students based on their certifications.
And so what happened
with it, Nykki? Go on.
So what happened in our particular district, we had a lot of teachers that did not return and we were unable to hire for those positions. So the teacher of record became the principals and the assistant principals. Their names went on as teacher of record, but they were not the teachers that were in the classroom. And we had a lot of subs. And normally what happens is you're supposed to, the state TA, the state of Texas, requires you to send notification
Oh,
to
you
the parents
froze.
that the child does have a teacher in the class. But when you're putting the teacher of record as these individuals, parents are thinking that these are the individuals that are in the class, and they're not. So that was what the problem was.
Now, another thing I see with the teacher of record is that there was really a mass exodus of people leaving the field of education in the beginning, middle, and the end of the year. There's another mass exodus right now. And in the beginning of the year, all classrooms were not staffed with a teacher. And as you say, there was a teacher of record. Some just started off with the sub, or they had a teacher of record who may or may not have actually been in that classroom. And the other thing that happened, um, in some districts, I don't know about yours, but in talking to people, they would have people in the administrative end go into the classroom because they are a certified teacher. But here's the problem. If I have been in the admin building for 10 years and you send me back into the classroom, I don't know what to do. And the reason I say that, classrooms have changed, the requirements and expectations have changed, teaching has changed, discipline has changed, and then I am qualified to go back in the classroom. Nothing against that person, but I doubt, or wow, their qualifications. So yeah, you have the teacher of record, and then you have someone who's actually in there. And that is something we, have to keep looking at. There still will be a deficit of qualified teachers for the upcoming school system. That is what I'm seeing. What are you guys saying?
So one of the things that I think it's called J9. I want to say J9 or J19. Anyway, our district went to the Philippines, and they hired individuals from the Philippines. And so we received 13 individuals from the Philippines. And there was a lot of resentment from the teachers who were already here, and that those individuals were receiving, they had a special bus that would bring them to school and take them home. And they were just receiving special treatment because they were not from this country. And in 3 years, they will be able to get their citizenship for coming here and teaching. So there was a lot of animosity and resentment from teachers who were from America and from teachers who were not. Now, I have to honestly say I was able to build relationships with the individuals from the Philippines, and they were actually really, really good teachers. It took the kids a while to understand. There was that language barrier initially. There was that culture barrier in that they weren't used to the behavior or the disrespect that was allowed by our
Mhm.
children here. But in the end, it worked out pretty good. And so I believe that that is going to be the new trend of bringing individuals from other countries to come and teach our children.
And that has actually been around for a little bit when we first started to see a teacher shortage, and I'm sure it will increase right now. And we don't know how that's going to play out in the long run, but I do see that trend is going to continue. Um, Looking at the amount of time we have left, let's just look at for a moment. There are some, we're going to skip around. We talked about mental health, and I want to deal with this, the anxiety and depression that we're seeing related to school. I see it as a therapist and have talked with others. We see it. First off, we'll talk about our students. Initially going back, and there were the things with, are you going to wear masks? Are you not going to? That's now over, but that's how school started. What is it going to be like? Students, I saw students as young as second grade who were freaking out at the beginning of the school year because I didn't learn enough. My reading's not where it's supposed to be, and I'm going to fail. And I'm going to third grade, but I'm not ready to go to third grade. And if I don't pass the STAR, I'm going to fail. And see, I'm just going to, I mean, this was a second grade going to third grade, literally freaking out about school, seeing high school. This is my senior year, and I want to get into the best college. What's going to happen? I'm afraid. What if I don't? I have this star. I didn't take this. So there were anxieties on all levels about our students. We're seeing an increase in violence, and that goes back to the lack of respect and respect for human life in general, which causes anxiety in our students. Now let's talk about the anxiety on this part of staff. We talked about this on this show before. Teachers who have had heart attacks in the classroom, teachers who have had strokes in the classroom at school and literally fallen out and had to be carried out on a stretcher. And then think about how disturbing that is, or anxiety producing for the student to see it as well. So, it's been just in talking with people, it is the anxiety that they feel about the demands that are placed on them and their inability to meet those demands. So what are you guys seeing in regards to just anxiety and depression with students and our staff?
I guess I can start. As I said, I received a promotion at the beginning of this academic year. It took them about the first whole entire semester to find a replacement. However, before I actually moved into the position, we had a 8th grade teacher who resigned. And so they asked me to do 3 days in the classroom and then 2 days with the district. And I would be dedicated to my new position in January. Well, January came around and we had a mass meeting with the all internal central office. We were all dispersed out to sub 3 days a week. And so a lot of it was, we did have teachers that were testing positive for COVID and were out because they were ill. But even if it wasn't COVID, the illnesses was mental stress and anxiety from dealing with the kids, teachers having to deal with weapons being in their classrooms, with students being hurt violently, and even with teachers being attacked or teachers being disrespected, as we said before. And so it's not so much of teachers just getting sick and not being able to come to work. Teachers are just not wanting to be in the profession anymore. And so there are teachers who thought I was going to make it a couple more years, but no, I can retire. I'm going to go ahead and take this retirement. I'm not even going to wait until this academic year is over. My day comes, I'm leaving right now. And so I went to several retirement parties throughout the year because they were leaving the profession. And so it's a mental strain. It's not just, we love the kids, we want to see them grow, but for the most part, we have to consider our safety as well. And as you stated, students don't respect that, and it takes a lot to get a student to be respectful. And then in the midst of it, students are fighting on campus, and I would have a problem if my child was getting beat to death and teachers were standing around. But that's what's happening. Teachers are not trying to jump in and break up these fights. They are just standing around because they are scared they're going to lose their job if they accidentally hurt a student in the process of breaking up a fight, or that a parent is going to file charges. We had parents who wanted to file charges on teachers because they were holding a student back from trying to attack another student. So it's not just the illnesses, it's the mental, it's the safety. It's, if I don't make this particular quota of students to get advanced or meets or masters on STAR, my job is in jeopardy, without taking all these other aspects into consideration.
There's so there was so many things that I could really just go into. I'll go. The first one would be when you talk about the illnesses. Just me myself personally, I had to be out. I had to get 3 stents in my heart. I had no heart issues, none. But it was the stress. It was the overworking. and I was done. Then when I did finally get COVID, I was out for 24 days. And so dealing and didn't get paid for those 24 days. So the stress and the anxiety when I came back was my immune system is not strong enough to do the things that you're requiring me. And so at one point in time, they had counselors in the hallway restroom duties, and Brown can tell you I had pictures of me standing in front, not standing, I had my desk set up in front of the restroom. I had coworkers to fall out in their office. I had the nurse who should be able to be the most healthiest person. She went on leave. Just the emotional, mental stress of her dealing with kids with COVID and then having to do these reports, and then people not wanting to accurately report who had COVID and informing people. And then when you talked about it, we had, if you go look in the news, our district had two separate accounts where teachers struck students. And it looks like the teachers were at fault, but they weren't. But they were placed in jail. They went to jail. They lost their certificate. And now they're going through court when you have them working with students. So let me give you this scenario. Because kids didn't want to come to school, then it became get them here by any means necessary. So that meant dress code was gone. That meant suspending students were gone. And so it became the wild, wild west. And so teachers were anxious and very fearful for their safety. We found guns. There was a bullet on one of the buses. Then we found guns in students' cars. And so we were under stress. It was a lot. It was anxiety. There was a lot of fear. And then to top it off, parents were being disrespectful. And then the administrators were immune because they have to be on both sides. And so they were coming at the teachers instead of trying to come to a restorative place. So it was not a very good year. My hope and my prayer is that next year that we focus, that we take this time, that we recuperate, and that some of the people, I can tell you now that 75% of our staff retired, left, went to another district. And we're talking about 75. So if we're talking about 100 staff, 75 out of 100 people left. So now we're starting over with 25, and 13 of them are from the Philippines.
Wow.
And I'm a school counselor. And so I get administration, I get teachers, I get parents, I get students. Central office, it wore me out this year. It really did. It really did.
It was a tough year. It was a tough year. It was harder than we thought. The COVID. This is a tough year.
Yes.
And unfortunately, I don't think next year is going to be too much easier. We're still we haven't, as a whole, we don't have it figured out. We have enough of it, and there are districts that are doing a lot, but we don't have it all figured out yet. I'm not a fatalist and saying we never will, but at this moment, we are so out of time. We didn't get to some of the other topics I really want to talk about, such as violence in schools, not just the mass shooting, but the day-to-day violence. I really want to address that and the impact of videos and social media, and those two go together. So I'll ask you guys to come back real soon to discuss. Maybe next week we'll make it part 2 and finish this topic of schools, because looking at violence, and I'll talk about a conference we have coming up dealing with violence and just social media. Nykki hit on it for a moment. You know, there were the various TikTok challenges, go slap a teacher, and kids who really did it. And it goes back to the respect and just how prevalent violence is in our schools. We are out of time. And I said in the beginning, we probably will go a little over because, you know, this was more than a 45-minute topic. But I always like to end on a positive note and end with our call to action. And unfortunately, in talking about education right now, there's not a lot of positive to say. But my call to action is this. Number one, Whether you have a child in the school system or not, be involved in some way as an advocate for our schools. If you have a child, first off, be there. I don't care if it's a pre-K through high school senior. Know what's going on in your child's school. If you don't have a child in school, be an advocate. Be present at the school board. Be present. Adopt a school in your neighborhood. Go volunteer. Now volunteer. You can
Mhm.
get back in. If it's volunteering to go read to elementary, if it's volunteering to go to tutor one student at the high school, one. Because if you do one and someone else one, it's going to make a difference. If you make a difference in one child's life, you've impacted their their world, their family, their community. So find a way to become involved. And as always, be an educated voter. So much of what we see in the school system, and we won't talk about everything else going on in our world right now, but even what we see in the school system is impacted by laws that impact us. And as one of my guests said, and these people don't have a clue as to what's going on in the school system. So, let's be really mindful to think about education in a different way. And when we vote, let that be one of your issues you consider. And COVID ain't gone, y'all. So be safe, mask up. If you're around it, you've been exposed, go on and get tested. It's not gone. Not getting ready to go anywhere real soon. Um, so be that educated voter and take care of yourself. I'll give each of you 30 seconds to have a final comment. Let's see, Nykki, you started. So Kanetra, I'll let you. 30 seconds to any final comment.
I just would ditto what you shared. If you have an opportunity to impact a young person's life, please take advantage of that opportunity. You would just be amazed at some of the things kids grab a hold on to and what they remember, and it just could make that difference in that child's life.
My thing is that while you're off for the summer, take time to do self-care, to get your mind ready, get your mind come back ready. Get your rest, but come back with a plan. What does your plan look like for your class? How are you going to model communication skills? Just come back with a plan. Get some rest and come back with a plan.
I ditto that as well.
Practice civility and be more respectful
Amen.
across the board.
Amen.
Forget the fact that our society is the rudest society ever. If
Ever.
one by one we begin to practice civility, one by one we can make a change. I will
Amen.
see you next week, and if my guests consent, we'll come back and we'll finish this conversation and look at violence and videos and social media. Those two, that's enough for one whole show, so I pulled it out. So thank you guys for joining.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.